Here is Sub-Zero! Now, Plane Zero!
Welcome back to Askewed Reviews, and this is another trivia episode. Today I'm talking about the 1987 film The Running Man. Here is your trivia question for today. Ben Richards has a very special way of signing his Running Man contract. What is it? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So, in the film The Running Man, this takes place in a dystopian future in the year 2017. The wealthy run everything as many resources are now gone. Art, music, and other forms of creativity are now considered illegal. The main way people get entertainment is by watching reality television. We meet our main character, Ben Richards, a pilot and soldier who is just given a mission to wipe out an entire community. He refuses to do so, so his team overtakes him and then finishes the task. Ben is then arrested and sent to prison. The story then jumps ahead to 2 years later, where Ben has made two friends, Weiss and Laughlin. The three of them work together to cause a prison break and then head off in their various directions. Ben then runs into a woman named Amber who he tries to use as a hostage to leave the country. Unfortunately, that does not go so well as he does end up getting caught. Now, instead of going back to prison, a man named Killian intervenes to have Ben sent to him instead. You see, Killian is actually the game show host of America's most popular reality game show, The Running Man. Richards is forced to participate, but he's not alone, as both Weiss and Laughlin have also been caught. The three of them will have to work together to survive as they make their way through 4 different quadrants. The real trick to surviving is facing off against a group of champions known as the Stalkers, which in fact they're really just a group of executioners with crazy outfits and really wild weaponry. So do Ben and his friends have any chance of winning The Running Man? This movie was entirely filmed in California. The director was Paul Michael Glazer, however, he was not the first director of this film. That was actually Andrew Davis, and the reason why he was no longer the director is he wanted a scene where Richard steals one of Sub-Zero's exploding pucks and uses it in the final scene. The producers didn't like this idea as it would look bad that he didn't use it earlier to save his friends. Against their wishes, he filmed the scene while they were already over budget, and because of this, he was fired. Other potential directors for this film were George P. Cosmatos, Carl Scheneckel, and Ferdinand Fairfax. The movie is loosely based off of the book by Richard Bachman, and the producers were actually pretty confused as to why the rights were so expensive. That is, at least until it was revealed that there is no Richard Bachman, but this is just a pseudonym used by Stephen King. He used the name so that he could write books outside of his normal ideas, and because publishers at the time were usually limiting one book release per year per writer. He wrote multiple books under the name Richard Bachman, but people didn't really seem to put the pieces together until he wrote the story Thinner. In this adaptation, the character of Ben Richards is of course famously played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. But did you happen to know he wasn't the only actor up for the role? There was also Dolph Lundgren, Christopher Reeve, Patrick Swayze, Don Johnson, and Mel Gibson. Richard Dawson plays the primary villain in this story of Killian, and at least in my opinion, I thought he did a great job. However, though, if you did speak to anyone who actually worked on the game show Family Feud with him, this character is apparently very much what he was like behind the scenes. The role of Killian was originally offered to Chuck Woolery, but he was unavailable, so they then offered the role to Burt Reynolds. But because he wasn't considered as high up on the credits as Arnold Schwarzenegger, he refused. But since Schwarzenegger and Dawson were lifelong friends, he suggested him for the role. Maria Conchita Alonso plays the character of Amber and was actually given a much larger role than what appears in the book. Professor Sub-Zero was played by Professor Toru Tanaka, who was not an actual professor, but was just part of his persona as a professional wrestler. They added the professor moniker into his character's name as a nod towards his professional wrestling career. Gus Rethwich was a character actor who really only played minor roles, but in this film he played the character of Buzzsaw. Erlen Van Lith played the character of Dynamo, and if you weren't aware, he was a classically trained opera singer. That is in fact him singing when he first appears in this film. Here's an interesting piece of trivia about Dynamo's outfit that makes him look like a human light bright. You can see green, red, and yellow LED lights, but do you know why you don't see blue? That's because blue LED wasn't invented until 1989. Unfortunately, Lith and Dawson both passed away the year this movie released. Jim Brown, who at one point was a professional football player, plays the character of Fireball. There's even a reference towards his career as Killian calls him the leading rusher. In real life, Brown was NFL's all time leader in rushing yards until the mid 80s. Jesse Ventura, who plays the character of Captain Freedom, was actually a professional wrestler for the WWF. Sven Ole Thorson plays the character of Sven, Killian's bodyguard. Now, Thorson has primarily done a lot of stunt work, but has appeared in some smaller roles here and there. Probably his most well known role, though, is in the movie Mallrats as the character of LaFours. There is apparently a popular fan theory that Sven is actually the re educated brother of Ben Richards. But this makes no sense to me, as Ben does not seem to have any recognition towards him. This movie is actually the cinematic debut of Kurt Fuller, who not only plays a small role in this, but is also the voice of the dispatcher telling Richards to take the shot at the beginning of the movie. Another actor who debuted in this film was Mick Fleetwood, playing the character of Mick, the leader of the Underground. Now, Fleetwood was actually the drummer for the band Fleetwood Mac. It's also lightly hinted at that Mick may actually be playing himself in the film, as he has a line saying, "You're one of the cops who locked up all my friends and burned my songs." Mick's compatriot in the film is played by another musician, Dweezil Zappa, who is actually the son of Frank Zappa. This movie actually did a great job of correctly predicting quite a few things. For instance, the fact that reality shows would become so popular, virtual home assistants, as you see Amber using this to turn on the lights, turn on the coffee maker, make toast, and even turn on the television. Also, the use of digital video cards, even predicting digital face replacement and deepfake technology. Did you happen to know that the opening dance number of the Running Man game show was choreographed by Paula Abdul, and many of the dancers were Lakers girls? If you're paying attention throughout the film, you can see plenty of fake game shows and television series, like Confess, The Hate Boat, Pain American Style, and Climbing for Dollars. Were you by any chance aware of the fact that the sequence with the helicopters at the beginning of the film was actually footage from the 1976 film King Kong? And speaking of monster movies, did you know about all of the connections to the Alien and Predator franchises just from this film? The most obvious connection is that the first Predator film does star Arnold Schwarzenegger. But do you happen to recognize one of Arnold's stuntmen from Predator? That's right, that's Sven Ole Thorson. And of course, you also have Jesse Ventura appearing in the first Predator film. In fact, Schwarzenegger offered him the role in The Running Man while they were making the film Predator. One of the main characters of Predator 2 is actually played by Maria Conchita Alonso. And finally, from the original Alien film, you have actor Yaphet Kotto, who plays the character of Laughlin in The Running Man. And speaking of popular sci fi franchises, The Running Man also has a reference to another famous Arnold film, The Terminator, as there's a point where Ben does say to Killian, "I'll be back." Now, the original line in the script is, "I'm coming back," but when you have an opportunity to use one of Arnold's most famous lines, you do so. Another line that appears in this film, which is now very funny when you look back at it, is when Ben is asked to join the rebellion, he says he's not into politics. The amusing part of this line is the fact that Arnold would, of course, go into politics and become the Governator. In fact, on his campaign bus, it even said the Running Man. And another funny thing about politics is that Jesse Ventura would also become a governor. Here are two pieces of random trivia related to clothing. At one point in the film, Ben is wearing a shirt that says World's Gym. During the time of the filming of this movie, Arnold was actually the CEO of World's Gym. The second thing is something you may have never noticed, but on the Running Man outfits, you can actually see an Adidas logo on the right arm and on the hip. Now, as you're probably well aware, as it's currently in theaters, there is a remake of The Running Man. This one, like the book, does take place in 2025 and is much closer to the original source material. Now, the 1987 film does take place during 2017 and 2019, but there are multiple other differences from the book as well, including the fact that the stalkers are very exaggerated in this version. Even though Stephen King is not a fan of this film, and neither was Arnold at first, it was wildly popular, so much so that it actually ended up being the reason that we have American Gladiators and the video game Smash TV. And speaking of video games, there was actually one made for this movie. Now, I never actually played this one, but just looking at the pictures, I don't think it was a very good game. So when it comes to the 1987 film The Running Man, I have a very special place in my heart for this film as I grew up watching it and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. And if you also enjoyed it, other films I recommend checking out are Death Race 2000, Rollerball, Escape from New York, and Demolition Man. Now it's time to answer the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. Ben Richards has a very special way of signing his Running Man contract. What is it? Since Ben is not happy about being forced to do the Running Man, while his court appointed agent is allowing him to use his back to sign his contract, he impales the agent with the pen, leaving the contract attached to his back.
When that quake hit, I'll tell you, it was scary.
Here. Use my back, victim.
And it almost woke the wife up. Ah! I love you. Yes.
Don't forget to send me a copy.
I hope you enjoyed this trivia episode of Askewed Reviews, and remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe.